I was away from my family. There were red flags, but because I was young and probably naive, and it wasn't physical, it wasn't ever physical until one point in time, which I'll tell you a bit later. But I never thought that domestic violence can be non-physical. So I was in denial, saying, no, we are in love, we're fine. And I didn't believe that what was happening at the time was happening to me. So what was happening is that I wasn't allowed to see my friends alone without him being present. That was the biggest red flag at the time that I see now, and I can't believe that I agreed to that. That I had to ask for permission if I wanted to go out without him. And I don't think I was ever out without him. In terms of, even going shopping. At the very beginning, it was kind of, just like this. It was very subtle. It wasn't very visible. We didn't really argue, so everything was fine. First year was perfect. We got married. I got pregnant. And then this is where I started seeing a lot more red flags. And one of them is neglect. So in domestic violence, apart from being it physical, if it is, a lot of times the abuse can be psychological in a form of neglect. I had a very severe cases of hyperemesis gravidarum. It means I was vomiting a lot at the first trimester, about 7 to 10 times a day. I was severely dehydrated. I didn't eat anything. And a lot of times I was asking him to take me to hospital, and he would say, no, you'll be fine, just try this. So he didn't. I remember as well that one day I had severe pain in my stomach, and I thought I was losing the baby. And he was at work, and I called him, and I asked him to come home early, and he didn't. And when he came early, he said, what do you want me to do? Finish the lesson early? And I don't think I was in so much denial that I didn't see how bad it was at the time. And now that I'm telling you, I still can't believe I allowed this to happen to me. Then we went to the hospital in the end, and I was really severely dehydrated. I had to get for a night on a drip and everything, and that was kind of, the overarching issue during the first trimester. Then everything got a bit better. I physically got better, so I got a bit independent. I didn't need him to come from work early and anything like that, and everything got again well and happy and sound. The baby was born, and there was no support during the postpartum as well. And he was neglecting me even more. I was waking up a lot at night to feed the baby. He would spend time, hours, nights on Facebook or playing Xbox. But he was never there to support and help me. He really didn't hold the baby. He didn't bond with the baby. So there was no connection between him and his son. So that was another red flag during the relationship. And again, I was like, I don't know any better. He loves me and I love him, and I just stayed. And again, because there was no physical abuse, I really didn't see the emotional side of it. Once the baby was born, I didn't have the income, so I started becoming more dependent on him in a financial sense. So he was not giving me enough money to buy groceries, so he had to come with me to do the groceries. So that was a financial aspect of it. And what else was there? We moved countries as well together, and so that took me even further away from my family. That means that there was no one would come in a heartbeat to help me and save me if something happened. And here in Ireland, we moved to Ireland. Here in Ireland, he just didn't care about how we would do, because for him it was like, I'm just gonna leave the country if I don't like it. But it was difficult for me because I had to uproot our lives again and the baby's life, and here I didn't have any. I needed visa to live in Ireland. He made sure I couldn't get the visa right. He wasn't giving me any money. My allowance was less than a teenager's, 5 euros a day. A teenager had more money than I did. He wouldn't allow me to go out. He picked friends for me, so there was a total control. The friends that I had were handpicked by him. He would bring them home, introduce them to me, and would allow me to hang out with them. And I think the last kind of few months with him, I started seeing those issues, because he couldn't use the postpartum depression for far too long, because he used it a lot, saying, oh, you have a PND, you have a PND. And I was telling him, I don't think I have a PND, I'm just frustrated with you. And so after, the baby was about a year old, I kind of started seeing more and more that this can't continue. Until one day he got physical. So that was confirmed that something was wrong in the relationship. we were arguing over plates, right? We didn't have much money, and we had literally 2 sets of plates, 2 sets of cutlery. And I was always washing them and putting them carefully. One day I was washing the plate after eating and just slammed it into the dish rack. And I got so angry, telling him, how can you be so disrespectful? Started packing, and I said, I want to go. I'm going to stay with my friend for a day and 2. We'll cool down, and then we'll come back and discuss it. But he didn't let me go, and this is where he became physical. He started pushing me. He pushed me severely several times that I couldn't stand on my legs. I fell on the sofa over and over again. And then when I said, okay, I'm going to go to the bedroom, I'm going to sit there alone, I'm going to lock myself in, and you're going to stay here. And there was a lot of abuse verbally saying, who are you? You are not from Europe. You're not a European citizen. You are a piece of, I don't want to say this online. So there was a lot of bad words and a lot of, putting me down. And while I was walking away to the bedroom, he kicked me with his leg. I protected myself with my hand, and my wrist got injured very badly. But I didn't notice at the moment because I was very high on adrenaline. I finally got into the room, locked the room, and me and my kid, we just stayed there all night, and my hands swelled, and it was very swollen on the wrist, and I had to go to the doctor next day. But that was the moment, that was the first time and the last time that he got physical. But that's what kind of made me feel, okay, I'm in a domestic violence relationship. I didn't even notice. Actually, I had to go through a lot of education later as well. I had to go through psychologists, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more in a bit, that were telling me you were in a domestic relationship all along, but you just don't know any better. No one educated you on that. So on the next day, I went to the doctor. The doctor was like, what's going on? What is your problem? How can I help you? And I burst in tears. I started telling him the story. I started telling him, okay, this is, my hand got injured, etc., etc. And then he wrote in a paper the reference to the hospital for the x-ray, saying, okay, you need to go to hospital now to check on your hand. But I didn't even read. But what it said, I actually still have that paper 6 years later, that says domestic violence victim, call the police.
So brave, ma'am. That is so inspiring. And even the thought of something like that happening with me literally scares me. So I don't know how did you deal with it and handle it, but it's quite brave and strong. So more power to you, ma'am. And also, ma'am,
thank you so much.
So what was that thought or that thing that made you realize that this needs to stop now and it is enough? What was that one thing?
It's hard to say what was that thought, because when you are in a domestic relationship, you lose the control. So it's all about power and control for the abuser. Abuser's final goal is to have you chained. Not physically, but to have you in total control. So I think I was in that relationship like a glass empty. So I arrived completely, and shifts, right? So I was working very early shifts at work so I can be at home very early with my son, because I was worried he can take him away from me. So one night I woke up to drink water. So that was about 2-3 a.m. and he was in front of his laptop. When I went to the living room and he saw me coming down, he just slammed the laptop closed very quickly. And I was like, oh my God, he's buying the tickets, he's gonna leave. So when he went to bed, I went and I opened the laptop and I had all his passwords, and I looked it up, and it wasn't any tickets. It was dating websites. It was emailing and talking to ladies and building new relationships. So at that exact moment, I think, where I emotionally let of him go, and I realized that's it. This is over. This is not going to happen. We're not going to continue. This is definitely the full stop. And I think that helped me to realize, okay, this can't continue. Because before, I may have had 2% thinking, okay, I might want to be with him. I might want to try again for the sake of my child. Maybe we should try, maybe. But yeah, that one was probably the last drop in my cup. My cup was too full.
Even I think, ma'am, vitality is very essential for this, and being courageous and feisty and stop it when it happens for the first time, because I think it's very invasive in nature. It's going to continue and happen again and again. So I think it should be shut when it happens for the first time.
Yes, yes, yes. But it is very difficult for domestic violence survivors in the moment to
Right.
realize what moment is the stop moment because of the control that the abusers have. Unfortunately, they are manipulators big time. There is a lot of guilt in this kind of relationships. I feel guilty for every fight we had. I felt guilty because I thought that it was my fault that everything is happening. It wasn't my fault. I understand that now. But back then, I was building up that guilt and thinking, okay, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. It's my fault. He said this. And there is a lot of, gaslighting. There is a lot of manipulation of perspective. And so when we argue, he can say sorry, but he will say the sorry in a way that I will feel, oh my God, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm sorry because I said that. No, it's not your fault. It's my fault. So when you live with that guilt, it's very difficult to separate what's his, what's mine, and what kind of relationship you live. And again, because the physical aspect was so minimal, it was only one time, I thought, no, it's just how marriage couples are,
Also, ma'am, the most prevalent question, that why would you stay with someone like that for so long? Like, let me frame it, like, why do the victims stay with the abusers for so long or even return back to them? So what is...
Because, okay, so I think personally from my experience, right, I'm not going to talk for all the domestic violence victims or survivors. I don't want to say victims. I think they change you so much. So I'm never the same. I'm not the same as I was. Obviously, we're not the same when we're like 20 years old, right? We change, life goes on and stuff like that. But I was changed 180 degrees. When I was a bubbly, outgoing girl, I'm an introvert now. I don't trust people. I have my issues. I still have them, right? But I have changed from being a completely open person to what I am today, which is maybe a bit sensitive about people's opinion. I'm a bit worried what people are going to say. I have a bit of a more guilt sometimes carried on than should be, have anxiety. And so personalities are broken in this kind of relationship. And so when you live in a relationship where you're shaped and you've been cut to a specific, person that the abuser wants you to see, for a long time you feel comfortable because this is the only thing you know at that time. I thought that being with my ex-husband was my comfort zone. And it was, in a way, right? That I can always feel that, okay, he's controlling, but I'm safe with him. So it was a false sense of safety, should I say? I don't know. It was very difficult because I didn't feel comfortable myself being outside. He also made sure that I don't love myself, that when I look at the mirror, I hated myself, that if I put a little bit of makeup, it'd say, you look like a clown, and so I would feel so inconfident with people around me that I don't know, and the only person I'm feeling confident with of being who I think I was my ex-husband. So I think that's why a lot of people stay with their abusers, because this is their bubble that was created for them, and they think they know no better at that moment of time.
Right. So, ma'am, what were the effects or ramifications of it in your life?
I was diagnosed with PTSD 2 years later after separating with him. I had to go through treatment. I had panic attacks. I had anxiety disorder. I completely lost confidence in myself. I didn't know. I still have an imposter syndrome. I feel like I don't belong where I am now. And so it was all coming from there. I still have anxiety from time to time. I had such a severe anxiety that I couldn't fly on a plane because I didn't trust that the pilot could do the good job. I was nervous sitting in the passenger seat in a taxi because I wasn't sure that the driver is going to do the good job. Because at some point in my life, I had lost so much control over my own decisions in my own life that I couldn't trust even small things like that. I was just terrified. I had the worst thoughts in my head. When my child was with the childminder, I was imagining that the childminder is irresponsible and done something to my child and fled the scene, that it will come back and I won't find my son or something. And this thoughts and anxiety and panic disorder was building up, and it was all in my head. So PTSD was the biggest revelation. I did not expect to hear PTSD because I associate PTSD with war veterans. But I went to a psychologist 2 years later because I wasn't feeling great. I'm sorry. It is still an emotional thing for me.
So, do you think it's just women's issue?
No, definitely not. 1 in 5 women in Ireland will be subjected to domestic violence. 1 in 17 males will be subjected to severe domestic violence, physical aspect of it. I think there is a stigma around being a man and being strong. So if it's not physical, we might not always know what's going on. Women would be more open to open up and leave the relationships and talk about it. Men might just leave and say, well, we just separated. And you would never know if they're in a relationship. So I don't think it's gender specific. I do think it's prevalent for women just because physically men are stronger than women in a lot of cases. But I also think that men are just not encouraged to speak up when they are in a controlling relationship. And so we wouldn't know unless they were in a severe physical relationship where they were physically subjected to abuse. So then, yes, then the statistics say 1 in 17 men in Ireland would be subjected to that, which is quite a lot, I think.
Also, ma'am, I think people are quite oblivious about the stats. Like 40%, men face a domestic violence. So they're not aware about that. And also, usually they, relate domestic violence to be a woman's issue, whereas men, as the stats say clearly, there are 40% men that face domestic violence. So I think we as a society need to be more receptive about it, that we need to accept the problem that it is not just gender-based and it involves a lot of genders. And even transgender, not just women, even transgender.
Yes.
So I think we also lack somewhere as a society, don't you think that?
I think we lack big time. When I left my relationship, I didn't tell many people because I got one comment from a person who I thought was my friend. She said, "Oh, you should have picked your husband better." And I was like, oh my God. So you don't want to share information to people because this kind of comments will kill your will to continue and go on and make you feel even more guilty about the relationship that you were in. A lot of cultures are accepting of the fact that the women are being controlled by men. I mean, a lot of cultures, look, it's still in Saudi Arabia, I don't know. Until recently, they couldn't even drive the car alone. That's, for me, it's a control on a government level of women. In some countries, it's perceived that men are, stronger than women, and men are breadwinners and women are housewives. So the gender roles are way too strict, but we're way beyond that. Just like you said, we have men and women, we have transgender, we have, gender fluid, and people don't necessarily feel like being a boy, being a girl, and it doesn't have to be. They can be biologically who they are, but inside they can be who they want to be. And the thing is, we as a society, we're not ready to see that. We're not moving away from medieval gender roles. We're not moving away from the thing that a woman has to be at home and bear kids and a man has to be the breadwinner. How can we support people that are in a relationship, domestic violence relationship, a man being subjected to psychological, to neglect, subjected to physical aspect, and not laugh at them? If we talk even about the rape cases, right, because sex and rape goes hand in hand with domestic violence, what if a man gets raped? What is usually man being told? You should have enjoyed it, And when it happens to a woman, what were you wearing? There is no support to genders, to the situation. There is no empathy. There is a lot of judgment, and there is always judgment. And we as a society, we should step away from assumptions, and that's the first thing that we need to drop. to stop assuming what happened in the situation and listen to the survivors and help them to get out of the situation. And as a society, we should be open and accepting of their stories. And that's why I'm telling my story today after 6 years almost, because I feel that it's time to talk about it out there. And I don't care if someone tells me that I should have picked my husband better. I want to see people in happy marriages all over the world. But, you know, it's just, it is what it is, you know. It's just, we have to, as a society, stop being so judgmental of each other's situations, of each other's stories, and just be more with open arms. A bit, you know, utopic, but that's what I want to see for my kids as well.
Absolutely. So, ma'am, what causes domestic violence? Like, you know, someone so close to you suddenly acts in a way that is, you know, causing you some kind of violence. So, you know, I know this is quite a psychiatric question, but if you can put some light on that.
I think domestic violence happens in two cases. I think the perpetrators are looking for prey. They're looking for their victims. They see their vulnerabilities. My family, my dad and my mom weren't in the best relationship as a marriage. They stayed together for us, but they were constantly arguing. So when I was growing up, I didn't really see that they were, how the good relationship in the marriage should be. So my example wasn't there, so I didn't know how it was. And I had a bit of a father issues, you know, because my dad was far away working a lot, and when he was coming in, he was arguing a lot with my mom. So it left an imprint in me of, okay, I'm looking for a person who can substitute all this. Where my ex-husband, he didn't have a father figure at all, and his father left them, to my knowledge. He lied a lot about his past, by the way, so half of it I'm really not sure which one is true, which one is not. But to my knowledge, his father left them, and that he also didn't have a functional family, and that somehow imprinted on him. So I don't think, I can't really answer psychologically, psychiatrically, how people become, perpetrators in a domestic violence relationship. How do they start this? Why do they start controlling? But I think a lot of it comes from the childhood, and I think a lot of it comes of what do they see as a good relationship, and how the relationship and the respect towards, you know, the other part. I'm not going to say woman or man, because now it's more than that. So it's a respect towards, you know, your partner. And if the partner is not there, if the respect is not there, then it's coming from other sources. Why do you not respect your partner? Why do you think the relationship should not be equal? So it could be a cultural, that it is accepted wildly in the society that the woman is your kitchen maid, or it could be, you know, that your family didn't teach you any better. From a lot of domestic violence survivors that were telling their stories, I'm listening to a few podcasts, every single one of them, I'm going to say 90% of them actually had an issue with their fathers or their mothers in the relationship, you know, how they were together. And they were growing up and a bit of dysfunctional relationship. And that in terms of visas and whatnot. So yeah, there were a lot of people there as well. It was full. Kids as well. It's just, it was quite sad. Sometimes in the middle of the night, the police car will park over and bring a woman in because that woman just came out of a big fight from her husband and had to call the guards. So yeah, it wasn't great, but yeah.
In India, it has actually reached heights here, you know, since the unveiling of the pandemic. The situation has become worse. And, you know, the worst part is the one place that people expect to be safe, that is home, has actually become a prison for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So in India, the situation is quite worse.
I think there was 20% increase on domestic violence calls during the pandemic as well, because we were in a lockdown as well from March to sometime in April, I think, when we started moving and opening up the country. Yes, and there were a lot of people in domestic violence being at home, stuck with people that don't respect them, don't treat them well.
Okay. So, ma'am, what can we as a society do to help the victims or the survivors to make sure that, this stops or at least minimize it? Do something that, at least it minimizes.
It's very hard question to ask from the society. I think we need to start asking our family and friends, the closest, is to see the signs. So one of them, if you don't see your family member as often, and the person comes up saying with a lot of, you would see this person often in the events, and all of a sudden you didn't see them because they are in a relationship, that could be a red flag. So try to reach out. Don't assume that everything is okay. Don't think that the sweet words that the partners use can be, they can be very deceiving. My ex-husband was very loved by a lot of people. And a lot of people I lost because they really believed him and didn't believe me. So I think you need to look at, the signs as a family and friends. Look at the people that you know most and help them to get out of that kind of situation. By helping, I don't mean, to yank them out. It's very difficult psychologically, even for a domestic violence survivor, to understand what was going on. But I would suggest to help to understand what kind of relationship they're in so they can make a better decision for themselves. Just to explain that, if he or she is putting you down, that's not right. If you feel guilty for a situation, that's not on you. And just this kind of conversation should happen. Again, it should be domestic violence victims / survivors. They should be supported and helped, but they are the ones that they need to make a decision to leave the household. Otherwise, it's going to be coming back to the same person again.
True, ma'am. Also, I think we need to be more benevolent towards the survivors, and, empathy plays a major role, because I think society also plays a major role in regaining, their peace and happiness. So I think we should be more, kind towards them.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of laws should be put in place to support domestic violence survivors. Like in Ireland, for example, during the pandemic, they were given a small amount of money to be able to empower the survivors to rent their own place during pandemic. If you are a domestic violence survivor and you fleeing during lockdown, the police wouldn't fine you for being outside of the house during lockdown. They would actually support you to get out and get you out of the situation. So on a government level, this kind of law should happen. Not every country has this law. Ireland is great. I think Ireland is at a very good, place with that. Could be better. There is still a lot to do. But I think when it comes to, say, Russia, for example, or Turkey, where domestic violence is culturally nearly accepted and there are no laws to protect them, there are so many homicides where partners are killing their own husbands or wives, who are mainly wives in Turkey. And recently there was a woman, Pinar, that lost her life in a domestic violence relationship like this. She was killed by her own husband. And, and it's now an instigating a big talk in Turkey to maybe start looking after, people in this kind of relationship. Same in Russia. There are so many people dying because, there's no law to protect. So if you are, say, for example, in self-defense in Russia, you kill the domestic violence abuser, you're going to go to jail for murder. But if he hits you and you go to police and tell them, okay, he hit me, they'll be like, it's your own fault. So there is no support in certain countries, and it should be on a legal system. It should be on a government level, and it's not everywhere it is. So I'm lucky I'm in Ireland because the legal system did help me a lot here.
Absolutely, ma'am. I think stricter laws we need. So that is all I have, ma'am. I think we'll take a few questions from the audiences that we have here. Just go through them once. Yeah. Ma'am, could you tell us how this has affected your child?
Yes. So my child was very young when that happened. He was 1 year and 6, 7, 8 months. Yeah, so he was 1.5, a bit over.